Case 1. The Zone of Silence. Mapimi Basin, Mexico, deep in the Chihuahuan Desert of northern Mexico, lies a region that challenges our fundamental understanding of electromagnetic physics. The Zone of Silence, or Zona del Silencio, spans roughly 50 square kilometers of barren landscape, where radio waves simply refuse to behave according to established scientific principles. This isn't merely poor reception or atmospheric interference. This is a place where the electromagnetic spectrum appears to operate under entirely different rules. Radio communications that function perfectly just kilometers away suddenly drop to complete silence when entering this zone. Aircraft navigation systems begin displaying erratic readings that don't correspond to any known atmospheric conditions. Pilots report compass needles spinning wildly or pointing in directions that defy magnetic north. Television and radio broadcasts that blanket the surrounding regions simply vanish the moment signals cross into this electromagnetic dead zone. What makes this phenomenon particularly disturbing is the precision of its boundaries. The zone doesn't gradually fade radio signals or create patchy reception areas like normal terrain features. Instead, communications cut off with surgical precision at specific geographical coordinates, as if an invisible electromagnetic barrier surrounds the entire region. Scientists attempting to study the area must rely on hardwired communications and mechanical instruments, because wireless technology becomes completely unreliable within the zone's perimeter. The meteorite activity in this region defies statistical probability. While meteorites fall randomly across Earth's surface following predictable distribution patterns, the Zone of Silence experiences an impossibly high concentration of meteorite impacts. Multiple space rocks have been documented falling within this small desert area, including a famous incident in 1970 when an American military rocket mysteriously veered off course and crashed directly into the zone despite being launched hundreds of miles away. Local wildlife exhibits behavioral patterns that contradict normal desert ecosystem dynamics. Animals that typically rely on magnetic navigation for migration avoid the area entirely, creating an unnatural void in regional wildlife corridors. The few species that do inhabit the zone display unusual characteristics, including plants with altered cellular structures and animals with atypical reproductive cycles that don't match their counterparts in surrounding regions. Electromagnetic field measurements within the zone produce readings that violate Maxwell's equations governing electromagnetic behavior. Equipment designed to detect radio frequency interference registers completely blank readings, not the elevated interference levels that might explain communication failures. This suggests the zone doesn't jam radio signals, but rather exists in a state where electromagnetic waves simply cannot propagate normally. Case 2. The Doorway to Hell. Derwez, Turkmenistan, 1971 to present. In the heart of the Karakum Desert burns a fire that has defied every prediction about fuel consumption and geological energy distribution for over 5 decades. The Derwez gas crater, known locally as the Doorway to Hell, began burning in 1971 when Soviet engineers accidentally breached an underground natural gas cavern. What should have been a temporary flare lasting weeks or months has continued burning continuously for more than 50 years, consuming fuel at rates that exceed every geological model of natural gas reserves. The crater measures approximately 70 meters across and burns with such intensity that its flames can be seen from orbit. Geologists initially estimated the underground gas reservoir would exhaust itself within years, yet the fire burns as vigorously today as it did 5 decades ago. This sustained combustion violates fundamental principles of reservoir dynamics and underground pressure systems that govern natural gas deposits worldwide. Temperature measurements at the crater's edge consistently exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius, creating thermal conditions that shouldn't be sustainable without massive underground fuel sources. The heat signature visible on satellite imagery shows thermal patterns that don't correspond to known geological formations or gas pocket distributions in the region. Ground-penetrating radar reveals cavern systems that appear to extend far deeper than initial surveys suggested. But the precise source of continuous fuel supply remains unexplained. Atmospheric analysis around the crater detects gas compositions that don't match typical natural gas deposits. The burning mixture contains trace elements and chemical compounds that suggest complex underground chemical processes are generating fuel faster than the fire can consume it. This implies geological activity that contradicts current understanding of how underground gas reservoirs form and replenish themselves. The fire's behavior exhibits characteristics that challenge combustion physics. Flames maintain consistent height and intensity despite variations in wind patterns, atmospheric pressure, and seasonal temperature changes that normally affect large-scale fires. The combustion pattern remains remarkably stable, burning in geometric formations that persist despite turbulent desert conditions. Case 3. The Boiling River. Hidden deep within the Peruvian Amazon flows a river that reaches temperatures capable of instantly killing any living creature that enters its waters. The Shanay Timpishka, known as the Boiling River, maintains water temperatures between 80 and 100 degrees Celsius along a 4-mile stretch of river that flows through dense rainforest hundreds of miles from the nearest volcanic activity. Geothermal models predict that water temperatures this extreme require proximity to magma chambers or geothermal vents associated with volcanic systems. Yet geological surveys of the region reveal no volcanic activity, fault lines, or underground thermal sources that could explain the river's sustained heat. The nearest volcanic activity lies over 400 miles away, making conventional geothermal explanations impossible according to established geological principles. The river's thermal behavior defies heat distribution physics. Water temperatures remain consistently lethal along the entire 4-mile heated section, without the gradual cooling patterns that characterize normal geothermal features. Thermal imaging reveals the river maintains uniform temperature distribution across its width and depth, suggesting a heat source that affects the entire water column simultaneously, rather than heating from below or specific points. Local indigenous communities have known about the river for generations, describing it as sacred and attributing its heat to spiritual rather than geological forces. Their oral histories contain no references to the river ever being cool, suggesting the thermal anomaly has persisted for centuries without any known geological events to trigger or maintain such extreme temperatures. Scientific expeditions to study the river have documented biological impossibilities surrounding the heated waters. The rainforest ecosystem immediately adjacent to the river thrives despite the extreme thermal conditions, with vegetation growing right to the water's edge where temperatures would normally sterilize soil and kill plant life. This suggests localized thermal effects that don't radiate outward as physics would predict. Case 4. The Gravity Hill of Hoover Dam, Nevada, USA. Within the massive concrete structure of Hoover Dam, visitors and engineers report experiencing gravitational effects that contradict both human perception and mechanical measurements. This isn't the optical illusion phenomenon common to gravity hills worldwide, but rather measurable alterations in how gravity appears to function within the dam's architecture that challenge fundamental physics. The dam's enormous mass creates gravitational effects that exceed normal structural engineering calculations. Surveying equipment registers directional readings that don't align with true vertical measurements, suggesting the concrete structure itself generates gravitational fields strong enough to deflect precision instruments. Plumb lines suspended within the dam hang at angles that violate gravitational physics, pointing toward the massive concrete structure rather than Earth's center. Workers inside the dam report persistent sensations of disorientation that mechanical instruments confirm rather than contradict. Spirit levels show surfaces as perfectly flat that appear tilted to human perception, while surfaces that feel level register as dramatically sloped on measuring devices. This creates a disorienting environment where human senses and mechanical instruments provide contradictory information about spatial orientation. Sound behavior within the dam violates acoustic physics in ways that suggest altered gravitational effects on air density and wave propagation. Voices carry differently depending on location within the structure, with some areas creating acoustic effects that make conversations impossible despite normal sound levels. These acoustic anomalies correspond to areas where gravitational measurements show the greatest deviation from normal readings. The dam's influence on local gravitational fields extends beyond its immediate structure. Satellite measurements detect gravitational variations in the surrounding area that exceed what the dam's mass should theoretically create. GPS systems in the vicinity register altitude readings that don't correspond to actual elevation measurements, suggesting the massive concrete structure creates gravitational effects that influence satellite positioning systems. Case 5. The Nazca Lines. Carved into the desert floor of southern Peru are geometric patterns so massive and precise that they remained invisible to modern civilization until aircraft flights revealed their existence in the 1920s. The Nazca Lines consist of over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 biological designs that stretch across nearly 200 square miles of desert terrain with mathematical precision that challenges every assumption about ancient engineering capabilities. The lines maintain perfectly straight trajectories across varied terrain for distances exceeding 30 miles, demonstrating surveying accuracy that rivals modern laser-guided construction equipment. Some lines run uninterrupted over hills, valleys, and ravines while maintaining geometric precision that would require aerial perspective to achieve. The mathematical consistency of angles, proportions, and alignments suggests construction methods that ancient civilizations theoretically couldn't possess. Ground-level visibility of the lines approaches zero, making their creation an impossible feat without aerial guidance systems. The patterns are carved only deep enough to expose lighter-colored soil beneath the dark desert surface, creating contrast visible from altitude but nearly imperceptible from ground perspective. This raises fundamental questions about how ancient peoples could design, execute, and verify patterns they couldn't see during construction. The preservation of these lines defies erosion models for desert environments. Despite existing for over 1,500 years in an active desert ecosystem, the patterns maintain sharp definition and precise boundaries that should have been obliterated by wind erosion, flash floods, and seismic activity common to the region. The lines appear as clearly defined today as they would have when first created, suggesting preservation mechanisms that exceed normal geological expectations. Case 6. The Crooked Forest. In a small grove near the town of Gryfino, Poland, stands one of forestry's most perplexing mysteries. Approximately 400 pine trees grow in formations that defy every principle of botanical mechanics and environmental adaptation. Each tree bends sharply at its base, creating a pronounced J-shaped curve before growing straight upward toward the sky. What makes this phenomenon truly extraordinary is the mathematical precision of their orientation. Every single tree curves in exactly the same direction, as if responding to an invisible force that affected only this specific grove during a critical growth period in the 1930s. Dendrochronology studies reveal these trees began their peculiar growth pattern simultaneously during their first decade of life, then abruptly returned to normal vertical growth without any documented environmental changes in the region. The uniformity of the curvature suggests a consistent external influence that affected hundreds of trees across several acres with mechanical precision that natural environmental factors cannot explain. Botanical experts have proposed numerous theories ranging from heavy snowfall to human manipulation, yet none adequately explain the phenomenon's scope and consistency. Snow loading typically creates random directional bending patterns, not uniform curvature affecting entire groves. Human intervention would require sustained effort across decades during the tree's most vulnerable growth period, yet no historical records document any forestry project or agricultural practice that could account for such systematic tree shaping. The surrounding forest shows no similar effects, creating a sharp boundary between normal tree growth and the curved grove that suggests localized influence rather than regional environmental factors. Soil composition analysis reveals no chemical differences, magnetic field measurements show no anomalies, and geological surveys detect no underground structures that might explain the tree's synchronized response to unknown forces. Most disturbing is the precision of the curvature angle. Measurements show the trees bend at nearly identical degrees before resuming vertical growth, indicating whatever influenced their development operated with mathematical consistency that random environmental factors cannot achieve. This suggests an organizing principle or force that affected plant cellular development in ways that contradict current understanding of botanical growth patterns. Case 7. The Blood Falls. Antarctica, discovered 1911. From the pristine white expanse of Antarctica's Taylor Glacier flows a stream of liquid so red it appears the ice itself is bleeding. Blood Falls represents one of the most visually striking violations of polar ecosystem expectations, where ancient water containing iron oxide creates the appearance of fresh blood seeping from a sterile ice environment that should contain no liquid water or biological activity. The crimson liquid emerges from beneath the glacier at temperatures that should freeze instantly in Antarctic conditions, yet maintains liquid state while flowing down the glacier face. Scientific analysis reveals the water originates from a subglacial lake that has remained isolated beneath the ice for over 1.5 million years, creating a sealed ecosystem that challenges every assumption about life's survival requirements in extreme environments. The liquid contains microorganisms that thrive without sunlight, oxygen, or any connection to surface ecosystems. These extremophile bacteria have evolved metabolic processes that extract energy from iron and sulfur compounds in ways that redefine the boundaries of possible life on Earth. Their existence in a sealed environment beneath miles of ice suggests biological processes can sustain themselves indefinitely under conditions previously considered incompatible with life. Temperature measurements of the flowing liquid defy thermodynamic predictions for the Antarctic environment. The water emerges at temperatures several degrees above freezing, despite originating from beneath massive ice sheets, where temperatures should remain far below freezing year-round. This thermal anomaly suggests heat sources or insulation mechanisms operating beneath the glacier that conventional glaciology cannot explain. The chemical composition of Blood Falls water contains dissolved minerals and metal concentrations that exceed typical groundwater by factors of hundreds. The extreme salinity creates antifreeze properties that prevent normal ice formation, but the source of such concentrated mineral deposits beneath ancient ice sheets remains unexplained. These chemical characteristics suggest underground geological processes that operate independently from surface conditions for millions of years. Case 8. The Taos Hum. In the high desert town of Taos, New Mexico, approximately 2% of residents report hearing a persistent, low-frequency humming sound that defies acoustic detection and has puzzled researchers for decades. The phenomenon known as the Taos Hum represents an auditory mystery where human perception records sounds that sensitive equipment cannot measure, creating a gap between subjective experience and objective measurement. that challenges our understanding of both hearing and environmental acoustics. Those who experience the hum describe it as a diesel engine idling in the distance, a low-frequency vibration that seems to originate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The sound persists day and night, varying slightly in intensity, but never completely disappearing. Listeners report the hum as distinctly mechanical rather than natural, suggesting an artificial source that extensive investigations have failed to identify. Multiple scientific studies involving acoustic engineers, seismologists, and audiologists have attempted to isolate the source using sophisticated detection equipment capable of measuring sounds far below human hearing thresholds. These investigations consistently fail to register any acoustic signatures that correspond to the reported hum, creating the puzzling situation where human ears detect sounds that precision instruments cannot measure. The demographic pattern of hum perception adds another layer to the mystery. Those who hear it span all age groups, hearing abilities, and background noise tolerance levels, yet the vast majority of Taos residents experience complete silence, where others report persistent humming. Medical examinations reveal no common hearing abnormalities or neurological conditions among hum experiencers that might explain their unique auditory sensitivity. Geographical mapping of hum reports shows concentration patterns that don't correspond to obvious acoustic sources, like power lines, industrial facilities, or traffic corridors. The phenomenon appears strongest in specific residential areas, while remaining completely absent in nearby locations with similar environmental characteristics. This spatial distribution suggests localized acoustic conditions that operate through mechanisms current science cannot explain. Most significantly, the hum occasionally stops completely for all experiencers simultaneously, then resumes after periods ranging from hours to days. These coordinated silence periods imply a common external source rather than individual auditory hallucinations. Yet no corresponding changes in measurable environmental conditions accompany the cessation and resumption of the phenomenon. Case 9. The Lake That Explodes. Lake Nyos, Cameroon, on the night of August 21, 1986. Lake Nyos transformed from a peaceful crater lake into a silent killer that demonstrated how Earth's natural systems can unleash invisible death without warning. The lake released approximately 1.7 million tons of carbon dioxide in a massive degassing event that created an invisible cloud of suffocating gas, killing over 1,700 people and thousands of animals within a 16-mile radius, while leaving no visible signs of disaster. The carbon dioxide release occurred without any seismic activity, volcanic eruption, or meteorological event that might trigger such a massive atmospheric disturbance. Lake Nyos simply expelled its dissolved gas content in a phenomenon that lakes worldwide are not supposed to be capable of executing. The gas cloud, being denser than air, flowed along the ground like an invisible tsunami of death, suffocating everything in its path while leaving structures completely undamaged. Survivors described an eerie silence following the event, with no sounds of animal life, no birds singing, and an oppressive atmosphere that made breathing difficult even outside the primary kill zone. The invisible nature of the disaster meant victims had no warning signs. People simply collapsed where they stood as oxygen was displaced by carbon dioxide concentrations that reached lethal levels within minutes. Scientific analysis revealed Lake Nyos had been accumulating carbon dioxide from underground volcanic sources for decades, creating a supersaturated solution that remained stable until an unknown trigger caused catastrophic degassing. This process, called a limnic eruption, represents a natural disaster mechanism that was virtually unknown before the Nyos event and demonstrates how seemingly peaceful bodies of water can harbor lethal potential invisible to human observation. The aftermath revealed the true scope of the lake's capacity for destruction. Vegetation along the gas flow path showed signs of carbon dioxide exposure, but remained rooted and intact, creating a surreal landscape where death had passed through without leaving physical destruction. The selectivity of the disaster, killing all oxygen-breathing life while leaving plant life and structures untouched, illustrated how natural forces can operate with precision that seems almost supernatural. Water samples from the lake before and after the event showed dramatic changes in gas saturation levels, confirming that the lake had essentially exhaled its accumulated carbon dioxide in a single catastrophic breath. The mechanism that triggered this release remains uncertain, making it impossible to predict when similar lakes might experience comparable events, leaving communities around the world vulnerable to invisible atmospheric disasters they cannot detect or prepare for. Case 10. The Time Distortion Forest. In the heart of Transylvania, near the city of Cluj-Napoca, lies a forest that appears to exist outside the normal flow of temporal reality. Hoia Baciu Forest has earned the designation as one of the most paranormally active locations on Earth, not through folklore or superstition, but through decades of documented incidents where visitors experience temporal displacement, electronic equipment failures, and biological effects that challenge our understanding of how consciousness and time interact with physical environments. The forest's most disturbing characteristic involves the systematic disruption of temporal perception among visitors. People entering the woodland report losing hours or entire days with no memory of the missing time periods. Unlike psychological blackouts or medical episodes, these temporal gaps occur to multiple visitors simultaneously, with synchronized watches showing different elapsed times for individuals who entered the forest together but emerged at different moments. Electronic devices experience catastrophic failures within specific zones of the forest that appear to shift location over time. Cameras malfunction, producing photographs that show luminous anomalies invisible to the naked eye. GPS systems register coordinates that place users in locations hundreds of miles from their actual position. Digital clocks freeze, display impossible times, or run backward while mechanical timepieces continue functioning normally, suggesting selective interference with electronic temporal measurement systems. Biological effects documented within the forest include unexplained burns, nausea, and anxiety attacks that occur without apparent environmental causes. Medical examinations of affected visitors reveal cellular changes consistent with radiation exposure, yet no radioactive sources exist in the region. Blood tests show elevated stress hormones and neurochemical imbalances that persist for weeks after forest exposure, indicating sustained physiological impact from unknown environmental factors. The forest's vegetation exhibits growth patterns that violate botanical principles. Trees grow in spirals, with bark formations that create perfect geometric patterns impossible through natural developmental processes. Some areas contain perfectly circular clearings where no vegetation grows despite healthy soil composition, creating voids in the forest canopy that satellite imagery confirms have remained unchanged for decades. Atmospheric measurements within the forest detect electromagnetic anomalies that fluctuate without correlation to weather patterns, solar activity, or geological events. The electromagnetic readings suggest the presence of energy fields that operate independently from Earth's natural magnetic environment, creating localized zones where the fundamental forces governing matter and energy appear to function according to different physical laws. Most significantly, the forest demonstrates temporal inconsistencies that affect multiple measurement systems simultaneously. Radiocarbon dating of organic samples from within the forest yields results that contradict stratigraphic dating of the same materials. Tree ring analysis produces age estimates that don't correspond to historical records of forest development. These temporal measurement discrepancies suggest the forest exists in a state where time itself flows differently than in surrounding environments. The phenomena documented at Hoya Baciu represent more than isolated anomalies or measurement errors. They indicate a location where the fundamental structure of space-time appears unstable, creating an environment where human consciousness, electronic systems, and biological processes encounter conditions that our current understanding of physics cannot adequately explain. The forest serves as a window into possibilities that challenge every assumption about the fixed nature of temporal reality and the universal application of physical laws. Visitors continue to report experiences that expand the boundaries of documented phenomena, suggesting Hoya Baciu represents an ongoing interaction between human perception and environmental conditions that operate outside conventional scientific frameworks. The forest remains one of the few locations on Earth where multiple reality-distorting effects occur simultaneously and consistently, creating a natural laboratory for studying phenomena that exist at the intersection of physics, consciousness, and temporal mechanics. These 10 locations scattered across our planet represent more than curious geographical anomalies or temporary scientific puzzles. They constitute evidence that our understanding of physical reality remains fundamentally incomplete. Each site demonstrates specific violations of established scientific principles, from electromagnetic behavior and gravitational effects to temporal flow and biological survival limits. What connects these diverse phenomena is their persistence despite extensive scientific investigation. The zone of silence continues disrupting electromagnetic signals after decades of study. The Derways crater burns with undiminished intensity after half a century of continuous combustion. The boiling river maintains lethal temperatures without any identified heat source. These aren't temporary aberrations or measurement errors. They represent stable deviations from physical laws that govern the rest of our planet. The pattern suggests our scientific models describe the behavior of matter and energy under normal conditions, but fail to account for environments where multiple physical systems interact in ways we haven't yet learned to predict or control. These locations may represent natural experiments where the universe demonstrates capabilities that exceed our current theoretical frameworks. Perhaps most importantly, these sites prove that Earth itself contains phenomena that operate beyond human comprehension, reminding us that despite centuries of scientific advancement, we inhabit a planet that still conceals fundamental secrets about the nature of reality itself. The laws of physics we consider universal may actually represent local conditions that apply to most of our experience, but break down in specific environments where deeper principles of existence assert themselves. These places where reality doesn't apply continue existing, continue challenging our assumptions, and continue demonstrating that the universe contains mysteries that may require entirely new scientific paradigms to understand. They stand as monuments to human ignorance and cosmic possibility, proving that our planet remains far stranger and more wonderful than our current knowledge allows us to imagine. The implications of these 10 locations extend far beyond their individual peculiarities into fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. Each site represents a crack in our scientific certainty, demonstrating that the physical laws we consider absolute may actually be conditional principles that operate differently under circumstances we haven't yet learned to predict or replicate. The electromagnetic disruptions at the zone of silence, the impossible thermal persistence of the Derways crater, and the temporal anomalies of Hoya Baciu forest suggest our planet contains environments where multiple physical systems interact in ways that exceed current theoretical models. These aren't measurement errors or equipment failures. They represent reproducible deviations from established physics that persist despite extensive investigation and attempted explanation. What makes these phenomena particularly significant is their geographical distribution across diverse environments and geological conditions. From Arctic glaciers to desert craters, from ancient forests to modern engineering projects, reality-distorting effects appear in locations that share no obvious geological, atmospheric, or magnetic characteristics. This suggests whatever causes these anomalies operates through mechanisms that transcend local environmental factors. The persistence of these effects across decades or centuries indicates we're not observing temporary aberrations, but stable alternative states where physical laws function differently. The Nazca lines have maintained their impossible precision for over 15 centuries. The crooked forest has exhibited synchronized growth patterns since the 1930s. Bloodfalls has flowed continuously since its discovery in 1911. These timeframes exceed human observation periods and suggest phenomena that operate on geological rather than human timescales. Perhaps most disturbing is how these locations challenge the fundamental assumption that physical laws apply universally. The scientific method depends on reproducible results under controlled conditions, yet these sites produce consistent results that contradict established physics. They suggest our understanding of reality may be fundamentally local, accurate for most terrestrial conditions, but incomplete when applied to environments where deeper cosmic principles assert themselves. The biological effects documented at several locations raise profound questions about the relationship between consciousness and physical environment. The temporal displacement experienced in Hoya Baciu Forest, the auditory phenomena of the Taos hum, and the cellular changes observed in visitors to multiple sites suggest human biology responds to environmental conditions that our instruments cannot adequately measure or our theories adequately explain. These locations may represent natural laboratories where the universe demonstrates capabilities that require entirely new scientific paradigms to understand. They force us to consider whether the laws of physics we've discovered actually describe universal principles or merely local conditions that apply to our immediate cosmic neighborhood under normal circumstances. The technological implications are equally profound. If electromagnetic behavior can be systematically disrupted, as demonstrated at the zone of silence, our electronic civilization operates under assumptions about signal propagation and device reliability that may not hold universally. If thermal energy can persist indefinitely, as shown at Derwez, our understanding of energy conservation and resource depletion may require fundamental revision. Most significantly, these sites prove that Earth itself contains phenomena that operate beyond current human comprehension. Despite centuries of scientific advancement and increasingly sophisticated measurement technologies, we inhabit a planet that continues revealing new impossibilities that challenge every assumption about the fixed nature of physical reality. The existence of these locations suggests we live in a universe far stranger and more flexible than our current knowledge frameworks allow us to imagine. They stand as permanent reminders that scientific understanding remains a work in progress, that reality contains depths we haven't yet learned to fathom, and that the cosmos may operate according to principles that make our current physics appear as primitive as medieval astronomy. These places where reality doesn't apply continue existing, continue challenging our assumptions, and continue demonstrating that the universe contains mysteries requiring entirely new approaches to understand. They represent not just geographical curiosities, but fundamental challenges to human knowledge that may require generations of investigation to resolve, if resolution proves possible at all. The pattern they reveal is clear. Our planet harbors secrets that transcend current scientific explanation, proving that reality itself remains far more mysterious and magnificent than human civilization has yet learned to comprehend. The implications of these 10 locations extend far beyond their individual peculiarities into fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. Each site represents a crack in our scientific certainty, demonstrating that the physical laws we consider absolute may actually be conditional principles that operate differently under circumstances we haven't yet learned to predict or replicate. The electromagnetic disruptions at the zone of silence, the impossible thermal persistence of the Derways crater, and the temporal anomalies of Hoya-Baciu Forest suggest our planet contains environments where multiple physical systems interact in ways that exceed current theoretical models. These aren't measurement errors or equipment failures. They represent reproducible deviations from established physics that persist despite extensive investigation and attempted explanation. What makes these phenomena particularly significant is their geographical distribution across diverse environments and geological conditions. From Arctic glaciers to desert craters, from ancient forests to modern engineering projects, reality-distorting effects appear in locations that share no obvious geological, atmospheric, or magnetic characteristics. This suggests whatever causes these anomalies operates through mechanisms that transcend local environmental factors. The persistence of these effects across decades or centuries indicates we're not observing temporary aberrations, but stable alternative states where physical laws function differently. The Nazca lines have maintained their impossible precision for over 15 centuries. The Crooked Forest has exhibited synchronized growth patterns since the 1930s. Blood Falls has flowed continuously since its discovery in 1911. These timeframes exceed human observation periods and suggest phenomena that operate on geological rather than human timescales. Perhaps most disturbing is how these locations challenge the fundamental assumption that physical laws apply universally. The scientific method depends on reproducible results under controlled conditions. Yet these sites produce consistent results that contradict established physics. They suggest our understanding of reality may be fundamentally local, accurate for most terrestrial conditions, but incomplete when applied to environments where deeper cosmic principles assert themselves. These places where reality doesn't apply force us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human knowledge. Despite our technological achievements and scientific confidence, we inhabit a planet that continues revealing impossibilities faster than we can explain them. Each location stands as evidence that the universe operates according to principles far more complex and mysterious than our current understanding allows us to comprehend. The pattern they reveal suggests we may be living in a reality far more flexible and strange than we ever imagined. One where the laws of physics represent not universal constants, but local conditions that can be suspended, altered, or completely rewritten under circumstances we're only beginning to discover. These anomalous zones prove that Earth itself remains humanity's greatest unsolved mystery, harboring secrets that challenge every assumption we've made about the nature of existence itself.